my name is Erin Morrisey, and I am the upper school English, history, and 8th grade religion teacher here at St. Thomas. And today I'm just going to take you on a quick tour of my classroom and tell you a little bit about the things that happen inside this classroom. So right behind me, you can see that we have our Angel House point tracking system. Here at St. Thomas, we have angel houses. The students are grouped into different archangels, and they compete with one another to practice showing virtue in their daily lives, in the classroom, when at Mass, on the playground, interacting with one another, interacting with their teachers. And so we have a tracking system to kind of motivate the students to really put into practice the idea that we ask them to live a life of virtue. Specifically this term, we are asking the students to practice being decorous and living a life of decorum. So that's our virtue this term. We just started a new term. So earlier this week, the students and I brainstormed some concrete ways that they could practice decorum in their daily lives. And we've promised to hold one another accountable in recognizing and honoring that, and just praising the life of virtue and lifting that up in all of the students here. So that's this side of the room. Moving over to this board right here, we've got our poem of the week or weeks. So each week I will choose a new poem related to the literature or the history that we are exploring at this time. And I'll ask the students to memorize that and recite it at the end of the week. And specifically this week, we memorized "O Captain, My Captain" by Walt Whitman. My 8th graders are studying Romanticism, so of course we had to look at the classic Romantic poet. Moving over to this side of the room, right here we have a timeline which integrates both our religion and our history curriculum. So a lot of the times I think that students struggle to integrate the church history with the history of the world at that time. And so I've combined our religion and our history curriculums to show the students in a really concrete way how the church influences world history and how world history has impacted the church throughout the ages. So our 6th and 7th grade history curriculum covers from the early church through the Middle Ages, and our 8th grade curriculum picks up right after that from the Enlightenment up till modern day. And so our timeline covers from 500 AD all the way up until modern day, and we're adding to that throughout the year. Our history textbook is from the Catholic Textbook Project. Our middle school uses our upper school uses Light to the Nations as our textbook for history. We also use Spirit of Truth as our religion textbook. We also cover some theology of the body as well, which is definitely my favorite religion curriculum to teach. Definitely something that would have been so beneficial for me when I was in middle school. And then at the back of the classroom here, we have a magnificent character chart of Hamlet. And that character chart we are going to start using this week. We are starting Hamlet with my 8th graders. And so at the end of this week, we are going to audition for parts, and they're going to perform different parts of Hamlet in class to really understand the beauty of Shakespeare and why Shakespeare is such an incredible playwright, why people have loved him throughout the ages. That is a question that I try to focus on a lot in my teaching, is why do we read this? What can we learn from it? So with the 8th graders, we read Hamlet and we talked about what we could learn. We're going to talk about what we can learn from Hamlet and his focus on the analytical, on his focus and the emotional side of things, the interplay between those two things and the struggle that happens when we don't find unity between those two things. We also read The Hound of the Baskervilles earlier this year, and we talked about very similar things with that novel, how the world wants us to be very analytical, but sometimes there are mysteries that we just can't understand. And that's actually a really beautiful thing because Christ can speak to us through those mysteries. Don't want to leave the 6th and 7th graders out. For the literature curriculum in 6th and 7th grade, I taught The Hobbit earlier this year, and I'm about to start teaching The Bronze Bow to those students. And in both of those novels, I am working to help the students understand something called the hero's journey, which is a classic literary trope that teaches the students the progression that a hero will take in a fictional novel. Now we looked at fantasy, and now we're going to look at historical fiction a little bit more. But the hero's journey is a really beautiful trope in that it mimics very closely with the life, death, and resurrection of Christ. And so the students and I have been able to discuss why that story speaks to people across the times of literature, why that story keeps getting repeated, what in our hearts makes us desire to hear that story again and again and again. So that's just a little brief overview of this classroom and what kinds of things are taught in this classroom. I'm happy to go into more detail about this curriculum and into more detail about how I teach this curriculum. Thank you for watching.